This is episode 23 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen, and joining me on the show tonight is prospect analyst at the Oil Night Prospect Network, Sean Patrick Ryan. Sean, how's it going tonight, man?
Going great, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I've wanted to have you on the show for a while. It's a good time too with there's so much going on in the prospect world right now with the Oilers having, I think they have more NHL prospects playing in Europe than any other team, right?
I wasn't aware of that, but I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, it's I've been trying to track them all year, and there's a lot of guys to track. That's for sure.
I thought I read that the other day that Ken Holland really got on that early, sending players over there, and I believe they have the most playing in the European leagues out of any other team in the NHL, and hopefully that's going to pay off here to give some of these kids a running start when they get either coming back to Europe or if they're coming back from Europe to North America to start their seasons here, or if they just spend the whole year there.
Yeah, I think that is important, and I think, like you said, we'll see that for some of the guys that do get an opportunity to play in Edmonton this year. Guys like Nygaard, for example, who I think will make the team. I think it'll make a big difference, and we'll see that as time goes on here.
Definitely, and I mean, of course, it's we're getting closer to Christmas, which also means the World Juniors are right around the corner. So it's a fun time of year for hockey fans. Is this something you always look forward to every year as well?
It's great. World Juniors is, I think many people, that's kind of their favorite tournament of the year, mine included.
Yeah.
I remember just even as a kid, just sitting around with the family and that's one thing we always looked forward to around Christmas time as a World Junior. So yeah, it's an exciting time. All the prospects are playing now, all the kids in U.S. hockey and they're all up and running. So it's a great time to be a hockey fan and an Oilers fan.
Definitely. And it's not hard to find a reason to cheer for Team Canada at that tournament anyway. But I find that when there's an Oilers player or prospect on the team, it makes it that much more enjoyable because you have someone that you're really invested in their development and watching them. And that doesn't just go for Canada. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago when Kyler Yamamoto was playing for USA. I don't want to say that I was cheering for the Americans, but I wanted to see him do well at the tournament. And of course, Broberg's going to be playing for Sweden this year, so I'm sure a lot of Oilers fans will be following not just Canada's games, but Sweden's as well.
Yeah, and for me personally, because I do scouting kind of all year round, you kind of develop what I call prospect crushes on certain guys that you kind of root for, and when they do make the World Juniors, it is kind of fun to watch, and it makes a Czech Republic versus Sweden game more interesting because you kind of followed a few of those players and kind of rooted for them. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and it's exciting for Oilers because we got a couple of guys, kind of our first round picks that are playing.
Yeah, I was hoping to be able to go out to Edmonton to see some of the games because it's only a 5-hour drive from Saskatoon, and I mean the World Juniors were here 10 years ago when Eberle was on the team. It was his second World Juniors, and that was the year they lost to USA in a disappointing overtime to the Americans, which denied them of winning 6 straight gold medals. But I went to a game that Canada played against Switzerland, and I think they beat them pretty easily 6-2. But I was looking forward to that this year, and because Edmonton's going to host it next year as well, I'll definitely be out there because when it's that close, I mean, why not? And hopefully the Oilers will have another prospect there as well next year. Holloway will have, be too old by that point, but hopefully Carter Savoy is there as well. So it's exciting. Have you ever had the chance to see any of the games live? I know it was in Toronto a couple of years ago.
The World Juniors?
Yeah.
No, unfortunately. And it was one of the things, it's on my bucket list. It was one of the things I was considering this year. Including I was also wanted to go to the draft in Montreal. Already had plans for that ready to go. Unfortunately, COVID kind of killed that idea. But the World Juniors kind of the same thing. I have family in Edmonton as well, and
oh, nice.
It would have been a good opportunity to get out there and spend some time with family and watch some great hockey, right? But
definitely. And I'm sure that the World Juniors that were in Toronto and Montreal a few years ago, I mean, that would have been an expensive ticket to get. I mean, just the fact of the cities that they're played in. And I'd almost say it was worth the price of admission because that was the year McDavid was there. And as a 17-year-old, I think he
Yeah.
tied for the tournament lead in points and led Canada to gold on home soil. So that would have been a good tournament to see if ever there was one.
Yeah. It was a fun tournament. I remember watching every game closely,
Oh
but
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely get out there. Maybe we'll meet up sometime at the next World Juniors tournament.
Yeah,
That'd be
definitely.
fun.
Have you ever actually had the chance to come out to Edmonton before?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
I
okay.
was out. Yeah, I was out to a game a couple years ago. It was I'm trying to remember with COVID now, just lose complete track of time and dates and that. It was a couple years ago. We were playing Ottawa, and Ottawa blew us out like 6-1. It was just a
Mm.
terrible game, like one of the worst games of the year. Of course, that was our luck. I took my dad out there, and yeah, I mean, we had a great time. Met a bunch of Oilers fans from Twitter. We all met up and had some drinks before the game and all that, and it
Oh,
was a
it's
great
awesome.
yeah, it was a great experience, and I definitely wanted to do it again soon, but unfortunately, like I said, we haven't yet. But definitely going to happen as soon as everything opens up again. I'm heading back out there for sure.
Awesome. And I'm sure most people listening to this podcast are familiar with you, but for anyone who doesn't, to add some context, Sean lives in London, Ontario. So not exactly in the Oilers region, but it's awesome to see that there's Oilers fans coast to coast. I mean, I know Oilers fans all the way from BC stretching out to the Maritimes now, where Michael from the Oilers Live channel right here is living now. And it goes, I mean, beyond that. There's Oilers fans I've been able to connect with in Europe and Australia even. So it's awesome to see this team, despite playing in a smaller Canadian city, is actually, has fans everywhere.
Yeah, it's a great fan base. Um, well, you know that as much as I do on Twitter. There's so many people who are passionate about the team and spread out all over the place. I went to Detroit there a couple of years ago as well and met fans from all over. We all met up, same idea. Took in an Oilers game in Detroit, and I know a lot of people that plan it every year for Buffalo and yeah. So I mean, it's not an original six team, but there's a lot of history, a lot of successful history, obviously with Edmonton in the
Definitely.
'80s and that influential. And I think it's that's why they have such a large fan base and a loyal fan base because it's a great team, it's a great organization, it's a great city too. I love the city
Yeah.
of Edmonton.
Definitely. And, I think that's a good time to transition into talking a little bit about fandom. And one thing I always like to do with my guests is find out a little bit about how they became fans of the team and, some of their favorite memories of following the Oilers. So I'll just ask you, growing up in London, Ontario, how did you gravitate towards the Oilers and become a fan of the team?
It's a bit of a long story, but it's really just it kind of started with my dad. Um, so my dad's always been a Flyers fan. When I grew up, I started. I guess my earliest memories, really, when I started to get into hockey, was the '87 Canada Cup, and I was a huge, believe it or not, I ended up becoming a huge Mario Lemieux fan. He was my favorite player for obvious reasons after that tournament. And just as a young kid, I decided, okay, you know what, Dad, that's my team. Mario Lemieux, I want to cheer for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I was cheering for them for a couple of years, and we didn't get a lot of games out here, but I was able to pick up the radio station and that. So I followed them pretty closely as a young kid. And then they didn't make the playoffs, and I guess it was 89, 90, and I had to cheer for somebody, and I guess my dad was kind of rooting for the Oilers at that time. And I remember people saying, Gretzky, with Gretzky gone, this team will never win another Stanley Cup. And I kind of liked the idea that they were underdogs. And my dad mentioned at the time that there was a couple of London boys playing for the team, and Craig Simpson and Craig McTavish. So as a young kid, you're kind of impressed with things like that. And we've got some homegrown kids that are playing for the Oilers. And I just remember rooting for them as a kid. And my dad would let me stay up and watch the games. And I just kind of fell in love with them at that point. So then I guess after they won the cup, I was an Edmonton Oilers fan / Mario Lemieux fan moving forward. I switched teams, but I still cheered for Mario. But the Oilers were my team, and they've been ever since.
Well, I mean, hard not to like Mario Lemieux either. I mean, Wayne Gretzky is my hero, but at the same time, how can you not appreciate Mario Lemieux, who's, in some people's mind, right up there, the second best of all time, just behind Wayne. And Of course, they won the Stanley Cup in 91 and 92. So even after you got to see the Oilers win the Cup in 90, it must have been a pretty good 3-year stretch there for you.
Yeah, it was. And again, as a kid, you didn't really, I mean, I didn't really know a whole lot, but it's nice to cheer for a winner when you're a kid. You can go around and go to
For
school and
sure.
kind of brag, and everybody's a Leafs fan over here, and some of them were Montreal Canadiens fans, and I was the kid that was different. I was the Edmonton Oilers fan, and I had the bragging rights for a while, right? So yeah, it's amazing what again, as a kid, what kind of is the deciding factor in teams you cheer for, but that's kind of how the cookie crumbled. And like I said, I just kind of stuck with them ever since. So
For sure. And I believe Craig Simpson actually led the league in scoring in the playoffs in 1990 in goals and points, as a matter of fact. So that must have even added to it that not only was this player on the Oilers from your hometown, but he was their top scorer in that playoff run as well.
well, exactly right. And I got to see plenty of highlights, and again, my dad he was kind of rooting for them as well. I don't know, now that I think about it, he probably had a lot of money on them at the time, but yeah, I mean, it's again, as a kid, that's kind of cool, right? You kind of visualize, of course, I guess I was about 10 years old or so. I was thinking, you know what, maybe I could play in the NHL one day. That's great. If these guys can do it, so can I.
How about your own minor hockey career? Did you play right from a young age, and do you still play recreationally today?
Actually, I didn't learn how to skate till I was like 12 years old. Yeah.
Okay.
I was a child of divorce, and my parents, they didn't put me in hockey. I played soccer. I played some baseball. When it came to winter sports, so I didn't play any hockey. I didn't even learn. So skating until I was about 12, maybe 11, 12. And by that point, everybody was already kind of into hockey. I just play road hockey, pickup, and all that. And then I started to um, really kind of fall in love with it, playing out in the bush in the wintertime, just going out to, a buddy of mine had a huge farm, and that we would go play till the sun came down, I guess, in the a little frozen pond out there. And then I joined some beer leagues as I got older, and my youngest kind of got into it a bit. So I started coaching him on that and getting him into skating, but I don't really play much anymore. But
Okay.
yeah, I never really played a whole lot of minor hockey, although I wish I would have. But also on a side note, my dad was so I grew up in Lucan, actually, which is north of London. They won Hockeyville there a couple of years ago. My dad was actually the general manager of the team there for a while. So I think, and we might get into this, but I think that's kind of where maybe the scouting started to come into. We used to go from town to town, and we used to scout different teams and players, and always talk hockey with my dad. And I think that's kind of where I developed that passion.
Awesome. And yes, I definitely do want to ask about your scouting background as well. But I just wanted to just a couple other quick things. Are you still coaching your kid today, or is your kid still playing?
No, he put down a hockey stick and he picked up a baseball bat, and he's going to be a baseball player.
Nice. But
Yeah,
from following your tweets in the off season, I think you're a pretty big baseball fan as well, aren't you?
I am. Yeah,
And
it's
if
pretty
I'm not
much.
mistaken, Yankees, right?
Yeah, again, this goes to my dad again. He played and coached for like 45 years. Um, I had an aunt that she died many years ago, but she got a scholarship to play baseball in the U.S. She was big into it, and a couple other aunts and uncles were pretty serious about it. It's always kind of been in our family. So, yeah, I played myself and coach for like 20 years or so now. And my son, I give him a hockey stick when he was 2 years old. But I remember in Canadian Tire, he's walking up and down the aisles with a hockey stick. He's like, "Daddy, Daddy, look at me!" And he was practicing outside for a couple of years. And then once he hit about 5 years old, he said, "No, forget it. I don't want it anymore." And he picked up the baseball bat, and he hasn't
Okay.
stopped. So
Well, that's good. I think I think it's important to give kids the chance to play a bunch of different sports and then let them pick. I mean, my dad put me in hockey and baseball when I was young because those were his two favorite sports. And then when I was about, I would say 8, I was starting to lose interest in playing baseball a little bit. Like I enjoy the sport now as a fan, but I haven't really played it since then. I made the switch over to soccer as my summer sport. So it was hockey in the winter, soccer in the summer. And it's funny because then I stopped playing soccer probably around 16, and I've been more of a baseball fan in the summer ever since. So I just think it's important to give kids the opportunity to play whatever they want, but it's I'm guessing, I mean, I'm not a father, but I'm guessing a lot of kids or a lot of dads want to put their kids in the sports that they love as well.
Well, yeah, but for me, I try not to force it on them. Like it's, I look back and I felt like I didn't really get an opportunity to play hockey. And I felt like if I was given that opportunity at a young age, who knows, whether or not would have made anything or not. But so for me, I just try and give my kids as much opportunity as they can, expose them to everything, and then let them decide. I'm not one of those parents that's pretty hardcore and you got to play this or you got to play that, right?
Yeah, I've called some hockey tournaments in the States, and I was even lucky enough to go to Europe and do one last year. And these are all, elite level athletes at age, say, 11, 12, 13. And just from watching in the crowd and talking to some of the parents between games, these parents take it very seriously. And I'm not going to say that they all think their kid is going to be the next Connor McDavid, but you can tell that some parents, really do have like NHL aspirations for their kids.
Oh yeah, hockey parents are hardcore, right? And I mean, a lot of parents live vicariously through their kids, right? They look at their kids as a meal ticket. Like if I got to push them, and they could make it big one day. But I mean, it's not realistic. The percentages are so low, right? So for me, again, I just try and stay away from that. I just let my kids just do whatever they want. Give them an opportunity for everything, and then they can kind of decide what they want to do.
For sure. I mean, even making it to junior hockey is a huge accomplishment. I have no idea, but what percent of players currently playing in the OHL will go on to play one NHL game?
Yeah, it's a good question.
It'd be
I
pretty
mean,
low though, wouldn't it?
I would think so.
I
Like
mean,
if you just
20 odd teams times 20 players, right? So
yeah,
there might be
400.
400 some in the OHL, and uh, do 50 of them make it? It's at any given time that maybe, right?
Yeah, yeah, something like that.
So it's tough.
10,
And then
15%. Yeah.
what percent of them go on to be stars? And the OHL is probably the best junior hockey league in the world. So they're saying if even that league, such a small percentage comes out, it tells you how tough it is to make the NHL.
Yeah, for sure.
And just to kind of finish up on talking about the Oilers, I'm sure that 1990 Cup run was it had to be one of your most special, if not your most special moment as an Oilers fan. But are there a couple other that just jump out at you right away and say, "Wow, that was one of my favorite games or favorite days cheering for this team"?
Well, I remember when the Oilers, obviously, with when when Dwayne Rollison got injured, and
Uh,
we went to the Cup there. What was that? 2000. Geez, now I'm trying to think.
6.
2006. Yeah, 2006. I was living right beside a pub that year, and the whole playoffs were pretty much a blur, to be honest. But looking back, I mean, that was an incredible run. That was a lot of fun because and then the Oilers, and that's what I loved about the Oilers for so many years, was just that underdog mentality, right? They
Yeah.
were always trading away players, their best players, and getting these no-name guys like Doug Waite and Yanni Niedema and all these guys, and then they become stars and key parts of the team, and then eventually they have to move on. But yeah, I just 2006 was definitely special for sure. And then I guess Shirley's second year when we made a run there, that was pretty special and a little surprising that we had success so soon after Shirley jumped on board. But
Yeah.
those are kind of the two moments I think. Well, we had a decade of darkness, right? So there hasn't been a lot of real
Yeah.
highlights,
I mean,
really. But
basically everything between Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final and the day that Connor McDavid was drafted by the Oilers, there wasn't a lot of good time in between that.
yeah, no kidding.
But to say those were the two bookends of it, pretty good moments. I actually met Dwayne Rollison in the airport after the 2016 Heritage Classic in Winnipeg. I was flying home to Saskatoon, and he and his son just walked by me, and I just kind of did a double take for a second. I said, "Is that Dwayne Rollison?" And then I was over drinking from a water fountain, and his son came over, and I said, "Is that Dwayne Rollison over there?" And he just kind of chuckled and said, "Yeah." So I asked, "Hey, do you think it'd be okay if I went over and talked to him for a minute?" So I chatted with him for probably 2 minutes, took a picture with him, and he was just a super awesome guy, and just took the time to talk to an Oilers fan from 10 years ago when he was playing for the team. So he was a pretty nice guy about it.
No, that's cool. And I got to I've met Craig McTavish a couple of times. Speaking of the
He
Oilers there
was there.
before, was he? Yeah. Well,
I
he's
didn't meet him. He walked right by me though. He was talking to some fans and high-fiving, but after the alumni game, he was at the stadium, and of course because he played and scored a goal in it. But yeah, he walked right by. I didn't meet him though.
yeah, Max. He's a pretty popular guy here in London. Like I met him at a Knights game there. I guess was it last year, about a year and a half ago, and he had a huge entourage. And again, obviously he's from London, right? But he's a super cool guy. Like he's very engaging, very down to earth kind of thing, and obviously he knows his stuff. But I've always kind of held him in high regard as far as I thought he was a great coach, and yeah, he's coaching over, and I just saw him the other day. Actually, he's coaching. I think the KHL or
He got fired from
Switzerland.
the KHL last year. I don't know where he is at the moment.
I just watched highlights, and the Oilers prospect was playing that team, coached by him. Maybe it was Switzerland. Yeah, he was on the bench there, coach. It must be Switzerland. I'll look it up, but I think that's where it is. But yeah, no, it's great to see some of these old Oilers, and they have a ton of stories too. Right? You wish you could just sit down and pick their brain for
Oh
hours and
yeah,
hours.
and I mean to say he was the third line center behind Gretzky and Messier. I mean to be the third line center on that dynasty, that's pretty impressive to have been a part of that team and to play such a pivotal role that he played.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I was just going to quickly check Elite Prospects and see if I could find out where he is. It's kind of loading slow right now. But meeting Craig McTavish at the London Knights game, I know you're a big Knights fan as well. We could talk about that for a minute here.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you actually go to see them play live during a normal winter where we're not facing a pandemic, and as well as watching them on TV?
Well, I watch every game. Like I don't miss a game for
Oh,
sure.
nice.
Um, like on TV mainly now. Like I used to go all the time, and with kids and my job, it's tough now. But I probably make it out to between 5 and 10 games a year in the stadium. Although moving forward, I think I'd like to kind of get back to the rink and try and take in at least 20 25 games a year. But I definitely don't miss a game. I've been a Knights fan since I was a kid, say 10 years old, whatever. The OHL, we've always been passionate about that. We've had, family and friends or whatever that have played in the OHL. Like you said, it's a great developmental league. It's the best junior league in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And London has such a great history and just a great setup in general, run by the Hunters. They know what they're doing. They run it like an NHL franchise. It's so professional, and the building's always sold out, and they just churn out so many NHLers year after year. It's a great thing to be a part
Yeah.
of and to be
It,
around.
it might be the best junior team in Canada, and to think of how successful that team always seems to be. I mean, I only follow the OHL on a very brief standard. Like the WHL, I follow a little closer because the Saskatoon Blades are here, and I'm always kind of keeping an eye on where the Oilers prospects are playing. But it seems like the London Knights consistently are a good team or contending for championships. Even I don't know how they do it, but they're just always drafting so well and developing these kids, and it just a first class organization from what I've seen.
Well, and there's a lot of people that are jealous, and a lot of London haters out there, and a lot of people say, well, they just buy their players or whatever. But I mean, couldn't be further from the truth. Like Mark Hunter is he's so good at scouting. If you go back over the Knights drafting history, you look at the guys they've drafted. It's just unbelievable. Some of these guys they get in like the third, fourth, fifth rounds, and they just when you have an NHL guy in Mark Hunter that runs the team and does his own scouting, and you have an NHL coach, Dale Hunter, who played for how many years, 20 years in the NHL. He knows what it takes to get there. I mean, why wouldn't you want to come play for this team, right? They really are kind of like a springboard to the NHL. And if I just kind of think as a parent, and I have my kid who's considering playing in, say, college hockey in the U.S., or they got drafted by the London Knights, they could go there. And I think my kid has a chance to potentially be an NHLer one day. Which route do I want to take? And it would be hard to not say London if that is your goal. You want them to eventually get to the NHL, because they have a proven track record. That's the quickest way to kind of get there, right? Like, they know what they're doing.
Absolutely. And, I met a group of London Knights fans about a little over 7 years ago when the 2013 Memorial Cup was here in Saskatoon. And I think Bo Horvat was their star player that year.
Yeah.
That was the Nathan McKinnon and Seth Jones Memorial Cup. So there was a lot of star players playing in that tournament that really made it exciting to watch. I got out to a few games, and between intermission of the Blades game against the Knights, I ran into about four of them at a concession stand, and I was just talking to them about what it's like cheering for the team back home. And it's funny, I asked them who their favorite London Knight player of all time was, or who the most popular player in London was, and all three of them said Robbie Schremp. So I'm curious, in your mind, is he the most popular London Knights player ever, or was it just that's what those three guys were thinking?
I don't think he was the most popular. No, he was he was one of the most talented players. He was extremely fun to watch. I mean, he would do, like, even in practice on, like, shootouts, breakaways, he would do like helicopter. He would flip his stick like a helicopter and do, like, all these ridiculous shootout goals. Like, he was an absolute wizard with the puck. But I think if you ask Oilers fans, or not Oilers fans, Knights fans, who's the most popular, you probably have to say, just off the top of my head, I would say Brendan Shanahan. I would say Corey Perry, and I would say Rick Nash. Those are probably and they all have their numbers retired. They're hanging up in the rafters. I don't believe Schremp has his number. I could be wrong, but I don't think Schremp's is hanging from the rafters. But Shanahan, Nash, and Perry for sure. I think those are probably the three most popular.
Would Mitch Marner be another guy who might be in line to get a number retired down the road too, or maybe Kadri? I'm trying to think of guys who would be in the mix.
There's been so many guys. Perhaps. I mean, it's like Schremp and Marner, those guys, they let him. Max Domi he was with Horvat.
Max Domi, yeah.
Yeah, he had a great career there. There's been a lot of guys. There's only so many numbers you can retire.
Exactly. Some pretty impressive names that we just listed off the top there. But no, that's really cool to find out a little more about it, because obviously this is a team and a league that you follow very closely. And I'd like to just now get into a little more of your scouting and blogging background. So I'm just interested how you got into that in the first place, and what inspired you to get into scouting, and how much time do you dedicate to watching OHL hockey and then creating content for your website?
Well, I've been doing scouting unofficially for a long time. Depending on the job I had, I would put in more effort than not, sometimes year in and year out. Currently, other than my full-time job, it's pretty much the only other thing I do other than spend time with my family, of course. I've got several mobile devices. I've got my phone and my laptop on each leg, usually while I'm watching TV. I'm always watching games, recording them, making clips, making YouTube videos, doing everything I can. It really is a passion. I love it. If I got paid enough, I would quit my job and do it full time. It's just something that I absolutely love. And again, I've been doing it for a long time. As far as the blogging goes, I've had the site up for, I believe, 4 years now. So in Ontario, in London, obviously there's not a lot of Oilers fans. So I kind of jumped on social media about 4 years ago, and I just wanted to 4 or 5 years ago, I wanted to talk to Oilers fans just about the team more, right? So I started doing it, and I found LT's site, Low Tide site, and I started hanging out there and communicating with a lot of the commenters. And I noticed I batted heads with a lot of them. Most of them were kind of pro analytics, and it was kind of my first exposure to it. And I didn't really understand why, I felt like I had some valuable opinions, and I've been scouting again unofficially for quite some time. And I felt like I knew what I was talking about, but people weren't very receptive to it there. So Like I said, I batted heads a lot, and I ended up leaving that site. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to go on Twitter and see what happens here. Maybe I can find some other Oilers fans that are kind of like-minded. So I started to do that, and I said, well, you know, I could probably, you know, just communicating with everybody. I was like, you know, there's an opportunity here. I feel like I'm kind of fortunate that because I do watch so much OHL, um, you know, I could bring a product to a market that doesn't really have that exposure. Like the Alberta doesn't really have access to the OHL much back then, and even currently. So I decided I'm going to start up my blog and talk about the OHL and kind of tie it into the Oilers and tie it into draft prospects and that. So that's kind of where the idea came from. And then I decided I was just going to use Twitter as the marketing tool for the website. So I would just chat with fans and then just direct them to my website so they could access the content. And it just kind of grown from there. I put a lot of time and effort to everything I do. Again, I'm very passionate about it, and I mean it's great. Oilers fans are so receptive. I mean they love the content. We love our prospects. We never seem to get enough information, right? So as long as people keep encouraging me and supporting us, then I'm just going to keep on doing it, right? But it would be nice if I got paid full time for it.
It always is. If you can, I mean, if you can always make money at the thing you love doing, I mean, that's the best scenario, right?
Yeah.
But no, that's awesome, and you know, I've read your work a bunch. I've watched the videos that are on YouTube and stuff like that. And actually, it's funny when I first discovered the Oilers Live channel
Hmm.
and was listening to Michael and the podcast that he was doing back then with the Oilers Live podcast. You were one of the first guests I remember hearing on here. And of course, you had your own podcast for a while on
Hmm.
here too, as well. So I mean, I've been listening to you for a long time. So it's I'm sure most of the people listening are familiar with your voice as well. So yeah, just keep making that content, man, because I know I really appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of Oilers fans feel the same way out here.
Yeah, and that's all I really look for at the end of the day. As long as I know some people are reading my stuff and some people are giving me likes, then that's really all I'm doing it for. I guess the only other satisfaction I really get out of it, being a London guy, I do have a lot of players, parents, and billets that'll DM me, and there's a lot of players that are, for example, their parents live in the U.S., so a lot of American players that they don't have access to the OHL down there. So I provide updates for the OHL and the Knights on top of the Oilers as well. And I get positive encouragement from them as well. And that's really all I'm kind of doing it for. It's just that. So
Well, that's awesome, man. And let's take this time now to transition over to talking about some of those prospects that you follow so closely.
mhm.
And um, I wanted to really focus tonight on Oilers prospects from the last three drafts, particularly their top prospects from those years.
Mhm.
They have some very talented players from 2016 and 2017 who are, you know, still pushing for NHL jobs as well. But I just wanted to particularly, you know, focus on the 2018, 2019, and 2020 drafts.
Okay.
So let's start by talking about a player that you've followed for quite a while now. He's widely considered the top prospect in the Oilers organization, defenseman Evan Bouchard, who was selected 10th overall in 2018.
Yeah.
Sean, where did you have Bouchard ranked in that draft class? And what did you think of the Oilers' decision to take him 2 years ago on his draft day?
That's a really good question. And I can't lie about it because it's all on my website. You could go back and find it. So I'm going to be pretty straightforward. Um, but I'm going to add a little context. So for me, typically, there's certain things I look for when I scout, and certain players that I gravitate towards. So in Bouchard's draft year, I was actually a little bit higher on Noah Dobson than I was on Bouchard. So for me, I was kind of hoping the Oilers would take Dobson just because he's a little bit more defensive and more well rounded. So I did have Dobson higher than Bouchard. I think I had Bouchard like 11th or 12th, roughly somewhere around there. And I think I had Dobson within the top 10. But at the time, I did understand the pick. The Oilers obviously had a huge need for a power play quarterback and offensive defenseman and right shot. And Bouchard certainly checked all those boxes. He was the perfect fit. Um, so I can't argue with the pick. I did write a thing there for the Cult of Hockey at the time too, mentioning that uh, and I know there were a lot of people that were excited about it and that were kind of pushing for him to jump into the lineup right away. And maybe part of it is because I watched him every single night since he was 16 years old. I was more aware of his flaws, but I was kind of pushing that, patience is needed for this kid. Like, he has some warts defensively. He needs to kind of work on his game. Don't force it. Don't kind of, push him when he's not ready. Give him some time. Patience is needed. And so I wrote about that before, and some people had kind of, fighting with me at the time, but I think now we can kind of see that patience was needed. And I think Holland did take the right approach and not rush him into the lineup. And so overall, I think it was a great pick. I didn't have him. He wasn't the number one guy on my board, but I'm certainly not going to complain. He's a terrific player, and he's come a long way since his draft. So I'm happy with that pick for sure.
Oh, for sure. And, Bouchard is my favorite prospect in the system, and I think he's going to be an important player for the Oilers for a long time. And one thing I know you often write about are NHL translatable skills. Mm-hmm. So after watching him play for, the past 5 years or so, what are the skills that you believe are going to make Bouchard are going to lead him to have a long and successful NHL career?
Well, we all know he has terrific poise. He's very calm and cool with the puck, and he doesn't really get rattled under pressure. And that's a great trait to have, especially when you become a pro, because you're going to make mistakes, right? So as long as he doesn't get rattled and he just kind of stays cool, I think that's going to help him a lot. But with Bouchard, his main qualities, and he's got a few, but as far as the NHL translatable skills, he's a terrific puck mover and passer of the puck. When he passes it, he just puts tremendous touch on it. He's always got his head up, and he leads the breakout. He just looks like a pro. Running the breakout, he makes, in transition, he's just deadly. He loves to jump up in the rush, and he knows when to kind of hang back and not get caught. He's a really smart player. He's not I wouldn't say he's a fantastic skater, but he's certainly shifty enough and elusive enough that I think that's going to translate well as well when he gets to the pros. But yeah, the puck moving and passing is kind of the main things, and the IQ as well, and then of course the poise on top of that.
Definitely. I mean, just from the games that I've seen of him play, you can see that right away that it's like he can see a target and the passes on the tape every time. So if he can, eventually make the Oilers and be springing Connor McDavid on breakaway passes and firing pucks from the point on the power play, sort of giving that power play a different look with someone who can really blast the puck. I think that's going to be a huge help for this team going forward.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And just one other thing, of course, obviously I left out the Bush bomb. That's the obvious one. I think he, like you said, on the power play, that's going to be a huge weapon. But this, again, leading those breakouts and kind of hitting McDavid and Draisaitl in stride with just a great pass out of the zone. The Oilers don't really have that. Like Ethan Bear this year, he kind of stepped up in his rookie year, and he was the best passer and puck mover, and Bouchard's even better than he is. So that's really exciting to know when he does come to the team. Not only is he going to be good in his zone moving the puck, he's going to make everybody around him much better, right? And again, that in the power play as well, that's we just don't have that big right shot option on the PP. So that's going to be exciting to see that as well.
Definitely. And just to have a guy on the team or in the system who has the chance to pile up the points from the back end. I mean, Clefbaum has flirted around 40 points. Nurse broke 40 points once, but I think Bouchard has the potential to be a 50-point defenseman at the NHL level, if not more. So especially playing with elite forwards, that's only going to increase his numbers. And just looking at his numbers, he's basically scored everywhere he's played. And, after putting up 36 points in 54 games as an AHL rookie with the Bakersfield Condors last year, he's continued to produce offensively in Sweden's second highest league with 17 points in 23 games this year. I've only seen highlights of him. I haven't watched a full game through. Have you been watching him fairly regularly? And how's his game progressed since you've been watching him this year and even last year when he was with the Condors as well?
Yeah, like you said, he produces everywhere he goes. But also another big thing is he logs a ton of minutes wherever he goes. That's the biggest thing, and maybe we'll get to this, I'm sure, at some point as far as comparisons between him and Broberg. But Bouchard, since he's basically 17 years old, has been logging over 20 minutes a game in every league he's been playing in. In London, geez, it was closer to 30 minutes, to be honest, here for a while. So he's a big minute muncher. He can handle those minutes. Again, it kind of comes back to the poise and calmness. He knows when to kind of pick his spots. And some people knock his skating, but he doesn't always. His skating is perfectly fine, but he just kind of paces himself, and he's quick enough to beat you when he has to, and he's agile enough to kind of get away. But he's just so smart and so poised with it. He has all the traits of a number one defenseman that you look for. I was just worried that he was going to be rushed in Edmonton like so many other prospects, but they've done a great job with him, and I think it's going to pay off.
For sure. And, I remember reading a report recently saying that because he hasn't become a full-time NHLer yet, that is there some concern that he's maybe not as good as we once thought he was. And I was kind of, thinking the opposite. It's nice that the Oilers organization hasn't rushed him and are letting him just develop into a hockey player as opposed to thrusting him into the NHL as a teenager and expecting him to play an important role. We've seen that happen how many times in oil country over the last decade?
Exactly. Yeah. And defensemen, everybody develops at a different curve too. And you're not going to make or break him. Well, you could break him at 21 years old, but he certainly he doesn't have to prove himself at 21 that he's going to be a star. If it takes him a little bit longer or you want to be a little bit more patient with him, there's nothing wrong with that. So I think it's going to be a good situation because there's no guarantees he's even going to make it out of camp this year, right? Like there's enough quality defensemen there.
And that's basically what my next question was going to be for you. Do you think that signing Tyson Barrie, who plays a similar game to Bouchard, is that going to block his path to the NHL this year, or will he find a way to earn a spot either way?
It's a good question. It's technically on paper, it's blocking him, but I think once he gets into camp, then they're going to see what kind of player they have. And with COVID, everything's still kind of up in the air, and injuries can happen too, right? So he's going to be there regardless for a while. We don't even know when the AHL season's going to start, or it's rumored now first week of February, perhaps. Although I guess you could say the same for the NHL. It might get delayed too, but he's going to be there for a while. And if anything happens to anybody, he's ready to step right in. I feel like this will be his year if he doesn't crack the opening day lineup, like the starting six. He will by midseason, like he'll be in there due to injury or whatever, right? But Larson's on the last year of his contract. Barrie only signed for 1 year, so there's two guys that are in front of him that are in the final years of their contract. So you got to kind of be a little bit careful. If Bouchard does kind of blow the doors off in camp and he is ready, you don't want to block him because those other two guys might not even be here in a year, and Bouchard will be. So you got to be a little bit careful with that. But either way, he's going to get experience. He's going to get some playing time, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he does crack that opening day roster somehow.
Absolutely. And another thing is the Oilers caught a huge break last year when he was able to play a full season in the AHL, and it didn't count against his entry-level contract because he's a late birthday and his signing date. So right. to think that he is just now 21 starting his 3-year entry-level contract, I think by the time he is a restricted free agent in 2023, we could be looking at a guy who is an important player on this team, and by that time maybe he is a 40-point defenseman. So that could turn out to be a huge value contract for the Oilers.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect situation. They did a great job with it.
And finally, for sure, yeah. And just finally, last question on Bouchard. if you had to like put a timeline, I'm going to ask you this for all the prospects today.
Okay.
When do you think he will become a full-time player in Edmonton, and what is his NHL ceiling?
I think he's going to be a full-time NHLer this year at some point. Like by the time we hit the playoffs, he's going to be in the lineup regularly. I think it's going to be because of injury. I don't trust Larson's back at all, to be honest. And, if heaven forbid, if anything happens to Barry or Bear, Bouchard is the next man up. He is the next guy there. And he's proven, like you said, and he's logged a ton of minutes over in Sweden. He did great. He did great in the AHL last year. He's ready to go. And he's already had a cup of coffee in London or in Edmonton in 2018. So I think he might be kind of in and out at the beginning, but by the time we get to the playoffs, he'll be a full-time NHLer. And as far as the ceiling goes, Jesus, with Draisaitl and McDavid on his team and him eventually being the number one power play quarterback, I could see him having his ultimate ceiling. I kind of compared him to John Carlson in his draft
Wow.
year. And I had the luxury of watching John Carlson here in London. So I'm not just blowing smoke. Carlson was the best defenseman I've seen in London since Bouchard. He has that capability. Brent Burns is another guy. He's very similar as far as his game goes. He's going to have to get a little bit stronger and obviously continue to work on his defense. But so many offensive defensemen are like that. And I think it's not unrealistic at all to think that he could be the next John Carlson in a few years.
So are we saying, like, in terms of ceiling, age 27, number one defenseman, power play quarterback?
Yeah.
And I mean,
For sure.
not every one of these players is going to hit their ceiling, but I'm just interested to know your opinion because you follow them so closely to know what their max potential is, and to think that Bouchard has the potential to be a number one defenseman, that's really exciting.
Well, just think about how he can move the puck, right? How many assists is he going to get just because of his puck moving ability, and just passing it to McDavid and Draisaitl? Like, he's going to be with those guys for years, right? And then think about how many points he's going to get on the power play with that boost bomb.
Yeah.
The points are going to be there. The only thing that's going to hold him back is defensively, as long as he's not a huge liability. And the key will be just to pair him with a defensive defenseman, just like Eric Carlson. Mark Mathot played with Eric Carlson. He had his best years playing with him. Same idea. Just get somebody like that, and maybe Nurse will be that guy.
Yep.
But yeah, that's all he really needs: a good complement defensive partner, and the sky's the limit for that kid. So I would not rule out anything.
And, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the last Oilers defenseman to score 20 goals and 50 points in a single season was Sheldon Surrey in 2008-2009. I'm not saying it's going to happen in the next year or two, but Bouchard, I would think if anyone's going to score 20 goals or get 50-plus points again, he'd be the guy.
I would take that bet too. Yeah, like I would, for sure. I would book it. It's going to happen. It might be 5 to 7 years, like you said.
Yeah,
but he has that ability, no doubt.
That would be awesome. All right, let's move on to the next prospect now. He's another former OHL player, center Ryan McLeod, who was selected 40th overall in 2018. Sean, I think McLeod was viewed generally as a late first-round pick, but were you surprised the Oilers were still able to get him in the second round?
I'm a little surprised he dropped to the second round. I guess before I kind of get into that, I just want the listeners to know, like, for me, I try not to sugarcoat it, and I try not to be biased leading up to the draft and even after the draft. So, if the Oilers take a guy that I wasn't necessarily high on, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to backtrack and say, well, you know what? Actually, I think he is a good player. I kind of stick to my guns that way when it comes to my analysis. And I know a lot of people, even after a prospect, they have somebody ranked low, and after their draft year, that prospect has a good year, they kind of do a complete 180 on it. And I'm not that kind of guy. So for me, to be honest, I wasn't real high on McLeod. I'm not surprised he dropped in his draft year. And if you kind of go back to, I wrote an article there, the Oil Knight system, and that talks about the NHL translatable skills that I look for. But I also am big on red flags. And just, again, doing scouting here for quite some time, I kind of consider myself a bit of a draft historian, and I've kind of gone back over all the busts over the years and all the underachievers, and there are a few red flags that kind of stood out that a lot of these guys had in common. So I kind of look for that now when I do my analysis. And for McLeod, he kind of had a few of those, so I wasn't as high on him at the time. So no, to answer your question directly, I wasn't real surprised that he dropped.
Fair enough. And this this was a guy who when I didn't know a lot about him before the draft, but when I started to watch the highlights, the speed is what jumped off the page for me. Just the way he was able to rush the puck up the wing and drive towards the net. In your mind, if we get back to the NHL translatable skills discussion, what are the skills that are going to make him? Because for me, it seems like he's not going to be a dominant offensive player. I don't know if I see him as like a top six contributor, but he could maybe fall into the category of like a solid third line center who is going to chip in some points here and has a lot of speed. What are the NHL translatable skills that come to mind for McLeod for you?
Well, speed is the number one thing. He has elite NHL speed, right? Um, with him and Lavoie and a few others, there's these guys have NHL translatable skills. They're first or second round picks, but they also have some red flags. So it's a little bit tough because a lot of these guys can overcome this. Like we're seeing with Carter Savoy, who dropped to the fourth round. All of a sudden, he's a world beater. 6-7 games into his
Mhm.
college season. So even though these guys have red flags, it doesn't mean necessarily that they're not going to make it. Just for someone that does analyzes prospects, just from my perspective, I'm just a little leery or hesitant at the time, right? So with McLeod, he has the speed. That's the number one thing. And I would say that he's another important thing. He's a very reliable, responsible player, which is going to translate well to the NHL. He's good in all three zones. He's defensively responsible. He picks up his man. He makes good reads. Those are important traits to have. So right then and there, the fact that he can fly and he's a great 200-foot player, he's pretty much automatic, has a shot at bottom six forward. So the question is whether or not he has that offensive upside. And he didn't really show too much in junior, even in senior year, didn't really kind of break out offensively. And even in the AHL, he was given a ton of minutes last year. Was really kind of pumped up in the lineup, and he still wasn't able to kind of capitalize on that. So there are some question marks as far as the offensive ceiling goes. But like you said, I think he has an opportunity to be either a third line center or third line winger, and maybe in a pinch he could be on the second line. I'm just not 100% convinced there's enough offensive upside there for him to be anything more than that.
No, fair enough. And he was just over a point per game player in his draft year, and then the following year when he got traded, I noticed that his point totals dropped when he went to Saginaw from the Mississauga Steelheads. And after that, like you said, he made his pro debut last year with the Bakersfield Condors, and he had somewhat of an underwhelming season with 23 points in 56 games and only 5 goals. But now he's playing over in the Swiss League, I believe, with Zug, Easy,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Zug,
Yeah.
and he's got 11 points in 15 games. So he's showing that he's, a top producer at that level at least. But I'm guessing that the Swiss League is even, maybe a step below what the AHL level is, or 2 steps below that level. So when he comes back, or if he comes back to play with the Condors this year, do you expect him to have still somewhat of an offensive boost, or are we kind of seeing him settle into more of like a penalty killing role, and we shouldn't be as worried about the points for him?
So with McLeod, I'm a little bit torn. Because he's 6'3", 200. He's got size and he's got speed, but he doesn't play a power game. And I think that's really what's kind of holding him back as a prospect. So he
I've
has all
heard
the
that sorry, I just heard that he's shied away from the tough areas of the ice. That is one of the knocks on him, right?
It is. And I mean, and I watched all the highlights and tried to watch as much as I could as far as shifts go for McLeod in the Swiss League. And I mean, he scored a couple of beautiful breakaway goals. But a lot of his assists were from the perimeter, kind of skating away from the play, just dumping the puck in. He just, and I said this in his draft year, and I continue to say it. He just has to want it more. It's as simple as that. He has the tools. He has an excellent wrist shot. He's got great vision, playmaking ability. He's just got to stop skating around the perimeter, and he's just got to go to the net more, and he's just got to want it more. That's all it is. That's all. If he were to do that, commit to that for a full season, he could be a hell of a prospect. And I mean, he still is. He still is. But because he has all that kind of at his disposal and all those tools, I haven't completely ruled him out yet because he is still young, right? He could just decide, you know what, like a switch flips, and all of a sudden now he's McLeod that crashes the net hard and with that speed, and all of a sudden he's a completely different prospect. So
For sure.
yeah.
And I think there was some real excitement about the player in the fall of 2018 when he was still he's a late birthday, so I think he had turned 19 by then. But do you remember he was one of the final cuts in Oilers training camp in 2018? I believe they even took him over to Europe when they went to start their season in Germany and Sweden. He was one of the final cuts there with I believe Bear too, and Bouchard obviously ended up making the team and then was later sent back to junior. But there was some talk in oil country, like, is this guy going to stick around for a few NHL games before he gets sent back to the OHL? So is it one of those situations where it just the speed that he plays at was just so alluring for not Craig McTavish, my apologies, for Todd McClellan at the time, that he wanted that guy in the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, he plays a very appealing game. Like he's such a graceful skater, such a beautiful skater that it's. I mean, it makes sense. And same thing with Broberg. Like he's athletically gifted, and look at how everybody fell in love with Broberg at this camp. It's the same thing. When you see a kid like that, 18, 19 years old, whatever, coming out and just flying like that, it is appealing, right? I don't think they did enough digging yet. Or I mean, it's one thing to, and that's the thing. It's one thing to look great in practice or in training camp, right? That's one thing. But once you actually get into games and you see them against competition, seeing them battling along the boards and in front of the net, it's a completely different story. And I think that's kind of what happened with McLeod. They sent him back. He got cut there right at the end. And then now we haven't really heard too much about him since, because now they've kind of identified his weaknesses and trying to get him to focus on that.
For sure. And just to wrap up on McLeod, same question that I asked for Bouchard. When will he become a full-time player in Edmonton, and what is his NHL ceiling?
Well, he's not going to be a full-time player this year. I'd like to see him get an opportunity in Bakersfield, be the go-to guy. We don't know what's going to happen to Tyler Benson, whether he makes the team or not. Kirill Maximov's going to stay in Russia, and Josh Curry got traded or he moved on to another team. So Bakersfield doesn't really have and we don't know what's going to happen. Cooper Marody, he's got injury problems. So I'm hoping McLeod's going to be the man. If there is an AHL season, he's going to be the number one go-to guy and kind of lead that team. And then we'll see what happens after that. I would give him at least a year, maybe 2 years. We'll see him in Edmonton. I still think his ceiling is a third line center, but he could be a very good third line center, very defensively responsible, take all the key face-offs, number one penalty killer, chip in some goals. I think we're Oilers fans. I think that the realistic bar kind of hope for a Todd Marchant type of career. That's the kind of player I think where I could see McLeod being at his ceiling.
I've heard that comparison before too, and when I think back to Todd Marchant playing for the Oilers, that was right around when I was, in my early teens, and I can see the comparisons between the two guys. Of another real speedy guy who played on the third line and could chip in a little bit here. So let's hope McLeod scores on a few more breakaways than Marchant did. Although Marchant did score one very
a huge one,
breakaway goal, a huge one. In my first year of really watching hockey in the 96-97 season, obviously the famous goal that eliminated the Stars in the 97 playoffs. I'm sure any Oiler fan my age or older remembers that one.
All I remember is the crowd. Belfort, Balfour, Balfour. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man. All right. Well, next up is the only real challenger for Bouchard atop the Oilers prospect depth chart,
Mhm.
defenseman Philip Broberg, selected 8th overall in 2019. Sean, there was some initial disappointment in Oil Country when Ken Holland made his first pick on the job because many Oilers fans wanted him to take one of those high-end U.S.-born forwards in that spot, but 18 months later, Oilers fans generally seem to be really excited about his potential. Let's go back to draft day, though. What was your immediate reaction when Holland called Broberg's name?
It's not going to sound too good because every prospect the Oilers never draft any prospects that I really wanted. And as a draft analyst, it's a little bit frustrating because it's like, you pour all this time and effort into these guys and you feel like you've got a good board and you know which guys would be good fits. And then when the team goes a different route, it is a little bit frustrating. I'm not going to lie. Although
Okay.
we took Ty Tullio this year, finally one of my guys.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
going to ask you about him later on.
yeah, Broberg, I didn't have as high uh, as a lot of people. I think I had him ultimately, I think the early 20s, to be honest. I mean, he's athletically gifted for sure. There's no doubt about it. For me, I kind of felt like at the time, I felt like there was a lot of similarities between his game and Nurse, and I felt like the Oilers already had Caleb Jones, Nurse, and Clefbaum. There wasn't a huge need for left defenseman, and we already took our number one guy in Bouchard the year before. So we already had, and Sam Marukov was coming. So I felt like defense, we didn't need to go defense. We really needed a U.S. scorer, and we didn't go that route. So I was disappointed. I'm not going to lie. Again, the proof is all on my on my website. So, but I mean, I understand the pick, and again, he's a very talented kid. I just feel like the Oilers needed scorers at the time, and they should have went a different route.
No, fair enough. And you know what? Myself too, I was sitting there thinking, Trevor Zegras would look really good in an Oilers uniform. Cole Caulfield would look really good in an Oilers uniform too.
Yeah.
And they kind of telegraphed it the day before. I sort of believe. I mean, when they did the panel on the Oilers website with Jack Michaels and Bob Stauffer, I felt like Bob was almost hinting at it that the Oilers were leaning towards taking Broberg. And I mean, it's hard to know how much to read into something like that. But
Mm.
obviously, the next day they're taking him. So, Ken Holland said right after when he was interviewed after the draft, to have a successful team, to have a good team, you need to have a strong defense. So I felt like when he came into the Oilers and he sat down with his scouts, I think he probably said to them, like, we really need to build up this blue line, and he wanted to get it to something like what he had in Detroit. So if that's how it turns out, then I was going to be on board with it. But I can't lie, I also wanted a forward there.
Yeah, I mean, if to be perfectly honest, I wanted the Oilers to trade down and take Phil Tomasino. He was my favorite prospect of the draft, but that never happened either. But Cole Caulfield, I thought would have been a great pick and a good compliment, almost like a DeBrincat type that would you could put as a trigger man with McDavid in a couple of years. But again, they went a different route, and it's hard to argue with Holland because he's done a good job, right? Um, but I mean, Broberg again. Maybe we'll get into it. He's got flaws too. Like he's not a perfect prospect. So the
Yep.
timetable on him is still kind of up in the air.
For sure. And like he showed really well at the Oilers playoff training camp this summer, and he's already equaled his point total from all of last season in the SHL in just over half the number of games. So his offense is definitely improving, and it's impressive that at 18 years old he was playing in the SHL to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So the only downside is I believe he has a -9 rating at the moment. So how much have you seen of him so far this fall, and how would you rate his performance through 23 games this season?
I've seen a lot of his games as Skellefteå. I've seen almost all of the shifts. Um, I had Instat, which is a very popular thing right now, where you can access any player's shifts and highlights and goals, assists, everything. You have access to any player in the entire database. And I had that for a month for free. So I was able to kind of access all the Oilers prospects and then all the prospects for this year. And Broberg was one of the guys that I kind of focused on. But I've also recorded on the side, watched a lot of Skellefteå games. So I would say with Broberg, it really has been, was it 23 games he's played so far?
Yeah, I believe he has 8
23?
points, two goals, 8 points in 23 games.
It's really been a mixed bag. It really has. He's had all kinds of ups and downs. He's had games where he's looked like he's just going to be absolutely phenomenal. He's had other games where he looks like, Martin Marincin, where he's made a ton of mistakes and then the puck's been in the back of the net. Some games he looks like he's just so confident he takes the puck and he just goes end to end. And then other times he's hesitant and he doesn't want to do it at all. I think he's not sure what kind of player he is yet. And it's perfectly fine. Like he's only 19 years old. He's still got a long ways to go. But I think and that's why, sometimes with these training camps and that, and I know there's some Edmonton media members, they really kind of pump the tires on some of these kids early. And for me, I typically take the stance, being a prospect guy, I typically take the stance of being cautiously optimistic, but certainly not rushing them and just kind of, to dial it back a bit. So when everybody was pumping Broberg's tires in camp, I'm like, you know what, just relax a bit. Like he's only 19 years old. Give him some time. And then after watching the 23 games, he certainly needs more time. The comparisons with Nurse are obvious, and I think there are a lot of similarities between the two. When Nurse was in the Sioux, he loved to carry the puck and go end to end, and Broberg loves to do the same. Broberg is a better passer, but he's kind of inconsistent in his decision making, and he struggles defensively at times. I think Broberg's obviously not going to be on the Oilers this year. We've already been told he's going to go back to Sweden. That's the right decision. He's kind of fluctuated through the pairs on Skellefteå. He's been top pair, middle pair, and he was in bottom pair for a bit. He even got scratched. I think, but next year he'll have a real opportunity to make the Oilers. I'm hoping they'll wait even one more year after that and wait like 2 full years. Bouchard will be full time by next year, and then Broberg the year after. But
They could even be it could be a defensive pairing down the road too. I mean, if that's the Oilers' top pairing in 3 years, I would be totally fine with that.
Yeah, ultimately it will be, but not right now, right? Obviously, it's going to take time. So with Broberg, he's young. He just needs more time, more experience. He's got to mature a little bit and just kind of figure out what kind of player he wants to be, whether he wants to be a puck rushing guy or just kind of pick his spots better, and that'll come with experience. So that's kind of where he's at. So he's not ready yet.
And he's also coming over to Edmonton right away for his third World Juniors. He played as a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old, and now this will be his last tournament at 19. Do you expect him to have a very important role in Sweden this year? And do you think at this level, after playing against the men, should he be able to, I don't want to say dominate, but be able to be a very productive player playing against his own age group?
Yeah, I think he'll have a strong tournament. I think he has an opportunity to be a defenseman of the tournament. As long as his coach gives him kind of free rein and let him do his thing, I think he can have a high offensive impact. And Sweden, they don't have their A+ team. There are a few guys that couldn't make it over due to COVID, but they still have a strong team, and I think they'll certainly contend. So it's and like you said, it's his third tourney, right? So he has experience. He should have confidence. So yeah, I expect him to have a big tournament.
And this is really what I'm excited about, because if I'm not mistaken, he was the defenseman of the tournament at the 2018 Hlinka Gretzky and the 2019 Under-18 tournament. Mm-hmm. So he's shown in the past, it was when he was 17, but that he is an elite player against his own age group. And that's why this is the first time, because the World Juniors is a 19-year-old tournament. And for him to be at this tournament and having a chance to play against his own age group again, I'm really excited to see, or looking forward to seeing, if he can have the same impact now 2 years on, as these players get closer and closer to becoming NHL players.
Yeah, and I think he will. And plus he's going to be in Edmonton, where he had his training camp, right? And he had some success. So he's kind of familiar with the city now, a little bit more familiarity.
And comfortability.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to him.
the Oilers brass, I'm sure, will have all eyes on him during that event as well. So that's an exciting thing to have for them. I'm sure to have him in the city where they aren't just having to watch videos from overseas. They can actually see him with their own eyes at that tournament.
Yeah, exactly. And see him go head to head against Holloway.
Yeah, exactly. Who we'll get to talking to in a minute here. But so, what do you see as his? You kind of touched on it there, but when would you, if you had to predict a timestamp on it, when will he become a full-time player, and what's his NHL ceiling?
Well, I think there's a high probability he could be not this upcoming season, but next season. I think there's a high probability he'll at least be at the bottom pair to start. I think they're going to want him in the lineup by then. But if not, it'll be 2 years at the latest. I think his ceiling. I mean, his ceiling is probably right now. I think he's again. I think he's very similar to Darnell Nurse. I think he's going to be an excellent number 3 defenseman on a second pair, and potentially be a John Klingberg type. Dallas, I see a lot of similarities in their game.
Okay.
If he kind of settles down a bit, and again, that's I guess and that's part of it, like developing as a prospect, right? We see the tools, but whether he develops the decision making and just figuring out what kind of player he wants to be, I could see him have a John Klingberg type effect
Hey,
ultimately
that
as
that'd,
his.
that'd be great too. And I mean, if he does settle into being a really solid number 3 defenseman for the Oilers, that's fine too. I guess I'd like to believe in my heart of hearts that he does have the potential to be a top 2 guy. So I'm gonna hold out hope that it might not happen right away, but maybe when he's 25, 26, like that's what he'll be.
Well, yeah, and let's be clear too. Like he's not like he's a left defenseman and Bouchard is a right shot defenseman, obviously. So they're
So they're
not
not
really, yeah,
competing.
they're
Yeah.
not competing, but he's not going to be a number 1 power play guy. Like he just doesn't have the experience, and he's just not as fluid or as comfortable running a power play like Bouchard does. So in that sense, he is competing for the number 1 spot and the number 1 offensive opportunities, which will limit his ceiling a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. But like you said, if he's a number 2 and he's playing top pair with Bouchard, that's the perfect scenario, right?
You know what though? I kind of like that he and Bouchard have different skill sets though, because Bouchard could be that guy who's sending the Oilers speedy forwards on breakaways, and Broberg can be the guy picking the puck up behind his own net and taking it end to end Bobby Orr style. So if that's if I'm not saying that he'll be Bobby Orr, but you know what I'm saying, being able to rush the puck from end to end and create offense off the rush like that. Whereas I think Bouchard will be more likely to spot the man streaking through the zone and just put the puck right on his tape, and he'll be off to the races.
Make the safer play, maybe. Well, I'll just say
Yeah.
that with Broberg, he can get away with that on a larger international ice. Let's see what happens in North America ice.
Okay, so you think that maybe the end-to-end rushes that we've been used to seeing with him won't be as common in the NHL.
I think it'll be similar to Darnell Nurse. You'll see him
Okay.
do it the occasional time. He's capable of it, but if he tries to do it too much, he's going to be a turnover machine and get caught. And I think no coach wants that, no team wants that.
Right.
So he's just going to have to learn to pick his spots when it's there and kind of go from there. So
Yep. And I also, if McDavid's out there, he'll be the one that you want carrying the puck through the neutral zone most of the time anyway. But
exactly.
But it is nice to have some other weapons. I mean, you look at some of these teams in the NHL when their defensemen are able to just skate the puck out of danger. To have that on the Oilers would be such an added bonus, and have it not always be on McDavid's shoulders every shift having to be the one to do it.
Yeah, well, yeah, just for even just zone exits, right? Just get out of your zone. You don't have to make that pass. He's so quick, he can just skate it out. I mean, that's going to be a big thing. And obviously, like you said, leading the breakout or whatever. But yeah, we'll see. Again, it's nobody has seen Broberg on North American ice yet. He's never played a game on the smaller ice. So his decision making is a little bit questionable, and his game is kind of tailors towards a larger ice. So let's see how he adapts first before we just anoint him as a top pair guy. We've seen Bush in the AHL. He had a great year there, and obviously he's been playing in London, Defenseman of the Year in the OHL. So he's got a better track record, I think, as far as trending towards a top pair guy than Broberg does. But again, if they end up being the top pair, that's the perfect perfect scenario.
Definitely. And we'll move on now to the second round pick from the 2019 draft. And, he's arguably the best volume shooter in the Oilers system. Right wing Raphael Avoir, who was selected 38th overall in 2019. And just like McLeod in the previous draft, I think Lavoie was seen by many as a first round talent. Sean, did you like this pick for Edmonton? And did you think that he would once again fall to the second round, just like McLeod did the previous year?
Yeah, so he's kind of similar to McLeod. So that some of his weaknesses are similar. And for me, again, as a draft analyst, just not Oilers, just as a draft analyst, I typically, after the first round, I typically don't gravitate towards guys that fell because of red flags. I like the guys the people are underestimating because they're smaller, or people say they're not quite as fast, kind of thing. Those are the picks that I typically like in those mid rounds. But in terms of value, anytime you get a guy that graded in the first round dropping to the second, it makes sense. So for the Oilers, again, they needed shooters, and he was the highest ranked guy, I'm sure, on their board. So again, it made a lot of sense. And with Lavoie, I'm torn on him too. It's kind of the same thing with McLeod. Lavoie's a little bit grittier, and he'll kind of go to the net more, but he takes shifts off, and he doesn't always come back in his own. He can kind of be lazy at times, and he doesn't look interested quite often. And I wish he would have had more of an opportunity. He was in the Allsvenskan League, which is basically the league below Broberg's league, the SHL.
The league that Bouchard was playing in. It's the second highest league in Sweden.
Yeah, the second highest. Yeah. I kind of wish he would have got an opportunity to play in the top league and kind of test his skills a little bit more, because it seemed like it was a little too easy for him. I mean, he's a big guy, and he's got a long reach, and he's got just a killer shot. So that's going to translate to goals no matter what, especially in that league. I would have liked to have seen him play against higher tier talent and challenge him a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, it made sense for the Oilers. It was a need. He was the best player available at the time. Again, with him, he's kind of similar to McLeod. There's good and bad with him.
For sure. And, playing in the Allsvenskan, he got off to a really hot start this year. I think he had something like 8 goals or 9 goals in his first 13 games, and he's slowed down a little bit as of late. I believe he has 11 goals in 25 games now, which is still about 5th or 6th in league scoring. So he's showing that he's one of the best goal scorers at that level. But it's like you said, he's very dangerous with the puck on his stick, but there are warts to his game and things he has to work out before he has any chance of, having an NHL career.
Yeah, and I think he was top 3 or top 5 worst plus minuses in the entire league. So for a guy that scores that many goals, you would think that's obviously a red flag. But again, with him, we just got to be patient and hope that he kind of just eventually he develops a little bit more consistency, and he just wants it a bit more. I mean, there's certainly similarities between him and a guy like Anthony Mantha, who kind of had similar red flags when he got drafted. Big guy, blistering shot, but just, a little bit taking shifts off and lackadaisical. It all depends on the development, right? If the coaches get to him, the AHL and the NHL, that's why drafting is one thing, but development is so key. That's what makes or breaks so many of these kids. And that's what's going to make or break Lavoie and McLeod, I guess, in my opinion.
Right. And, just looking strictly at the numbers, like last year, he finished his junior career on a 17-game point streak. He was, filling the net with, I think both teams he played with, really, he was traded from the Mooseheads to Chicoutimi, I think he went to? Not Chicoutimi, forgive me, I'm forgetting the name of the French Quebec city where he was traded to, but he was playing well both places that he played, and he, like I said, he carried over. He's showing that he still has that goal scoring ability in playing pro hockey in Sweden. But I'm just wondering if he could turn into a James Neal type guy, a guy who scores 20 goals a year. Maybe he's a second line winger, and that's just his real ability, is to fire the puck and just. There might be other areas of his game that you wish he could improve, but he's got that one ability that you're really looking for, and that's to put the puck on net. And that's something that the Oilers need. They desperately need more goal scorers.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, he did get traded to Chicoutimi. You're right. He was in Halifax. He got traded to Chicoutimi.
Was I right?
Dawson,
Oh, okay.
yeah, Dawson
Got
Dawson
lucky on
Mercer.
that one.
Yeah, Dawson Mercer also got traded at the same time, so they kind of loaded up there. Uh, but you're right. Yeah, he has elite. He has an elite NHL shot. He does. So he has that ability to score. It's just going to be is he going to be in the right situation? Is he going to want it bad enough? Is he going to get enough opportunity? Is he going to improve his consistency and his play away from the puck? Those are kind of the big question marks with him. So again, it's I certainly don't rule him out. He probably wouldn't have been my choice at the time, but there's enough there that people that are optimistic about him. I totally get it. He can score. The Oilers need shooters, and if you put him in the right situation and it clicks and it works, then great, right? But
Yeah.
there is risk with this prospect. There is bust potential.
Oh, of course, and see that's going to be the tricky thing when they work him into the lineup because, eventually he might be a guy who could play on Draisaitl and McDavid's wing and really take advantage of their feathery passes and just, like I said, score 20 to 25 goals because he's just got such an accurate shot, and those guys will put him in prime scoring positions. But I just wonder, breaking into the league, he's probably going to have to start on the third or fourth line. And can a guy like that thrive playing in a bottom six role where he doesn't have an elite playmaker setting him up?
Yeah, we don't know, right? We'll see what happens.
But I'm really interested to see him in the AHL. I believe he's spending the full year in Sweden. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what Stauffer said on the show
Right.
yesterday. So, and to be honest, I don't think that's the best thing for him. It doesn't. His team's not very good.
That's it. He's on a really weak team over there. He's got no one to play with. I mean, I don't. Is that even good for his development? I mean, I'm sure it's good that he's playing, but
yeah,
if he's playing on a weak team and he's got no hope of being in the playoffs, I'm not saying it's going to stunt his growth, but it'd be nice to have him playing with some more skill too.
Yeah, and the other thing is, he was supposed to play for, I forget which team it was in Sweden.
Rogel, I believe.
Was it Rogel? Okay, he was supposed
so.
to play with Rogel, and then they backed out, and they were apparently looking at Cole Caulfield, and then that never materialized. There's I don't know if there's character issues or something else that's going on. People have concerns with him. I'm not really sure, but there's a reason why he dropped to the second round. And I think it has to do with, his defensive play and his lack of just overall commitment and work ethic. And that's a big thing for me when I do the scouting. I love guys with the high motor, the high work ethic. You can't teach those. You can't teach that, right? And the guys that are lazy, that take shifts off, those are the guys that I really worry about. And more often than not, those are the guys that end up busting in the end. So with Lavoie, well, it's still to be determined. We'll see. He has the potential, but whether it's boom or bust, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that he's going to be a guy that's going to find a way to make it. We basically, I mean, just through our conversation, you kind of break down the NHL translatable skills too. I mean, the shot is the big one for him. But is there anything else that really stands out to you? And then we'll just go into talking about when do you see an estimated time of arrival for him in the NHL and what's his ceiling?
The shot is his bread and butter. That's what's going to get him to the NHL. As far as the skating goes, I mean, I would say it's good enough. The compete level is not good enough. The hockey IQ is kind of sporadic. He's pretty much, I mean, his playmaking is kind of sneaky. Sometimes he's got pretty good hands and he can make some plays you don't really expect, but he's got the size too, the size and the strength. So that'll help him. But the shot is kind of the main thing. As far as a ETA, when he's going to arrive, like you said, you're definitely going to want to see him in the AHL. I would give him 2 years in the AHL and then kind of go from there.
He's also a late birthday, so as a bit of an older prospect, that might put him at, because he just turned 20, right? So now, I mean, playing this year in Sweden, 2 years. So are we? Yeah, maybe age. He'd be, I guess, just turning 23 then by 2 years from now. Maybe by then, yeah, it'd be good if he's starting to show some NHL potential.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, I put out my top 10 Oilers prospects. I put out a list there not too long ago, and I had him number 7th, but I had Kirill Maximov number 6th,
Okay.
and I think they're very similar prospects. They have
Yeah, I can see that.
except for the difference is Maximov has the work ethic, and
Okay.
he plays a 200-foot game, and he can and he battles every shift. He's always out there. You notice him. And Lavoie, you don't see that yet. So that's what I want to see from Lavoie when he gets to the AHL. I want to see him battle. I want to see him in his own zone, not just floating and just kind of hanging out in the middle. I want to see him get dirty and do what it takes to win, and not just only skate when he's in the offensive zone, right?
For sure. And look, Keith Gretzky has said in an interview that going forward, the Oilers are going to give the cherry minutes to their NHL caliber prospects in Bakersfield. So he's going to be a guy that the organization is going to invest a lot of time into. So I'm hoping he's going to take advantage of that opportunity. And when he arrives in Bakersfield in the fall of 2021, he's probably going to have an opportunity to play a top 6 role. So when he steps into that, sees the day, sees that opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you're right. He's going to get that opportunity. Let's see what he does with it.
Yeah. And just I can't remember if I got it from you or not, but NHL ceiling for him.
NHL ceiling, I would say Anthony Mantha, because they're big guys. They both came out of the queue, both big guys. Mantha has that killer shot, and Mantha, the big knocks on him was his inconsistency and taking shifts off and not coming back defensively. And Mantha, I'm a big fan of Mantha now. I like his game a lot, and I think Lavoie has a lot of the same qualities. So let's hope he takes his career by the horns, I guess, and decides I want to be a pro and starts playing and acting like a pro, because he has enough tools. He's got that elite shot. He can make it if he wants to.
For sure. All right, we've got 3 more prospects to talk about tonight, and they're all from this year's draft in 2020, which took place a couple months ago in early October. And we'll start with talking about the top prospect, who they picked with their 14th overall pick, center Dylan Holloway. I know there were a lot of fans in Oil Country hoping that Seth Jarvis would fall to Edmonton, and he nearly did. Mm-hmm. But, instead the Oilers got the NCAA player who they might have not known as much about as the WHL kid. But Sean, was Holloway one of the guys who you had targeted for the Oilers in the first round this year? And what did you think of this year's pick as well?
So Holloway was one of the options. To be honest, on my board, which I kind of do every year now, he was the second option I had. Rodion Amirov was the guy I would have took if I was the Oilers, but Holloway was the second choice. So I certainly can't complain. He is, there's a lot to like about Holloway. He's got a lot of potential here. I think if he got drafted by a different team, we might be looking at him a little bit differently as a potential second or third line center. But in Edmonton, he's got an opportunity here to be a top 6 power winger, power forward, playing with either Draisaitl or McDavid, and I think that ups his value. He's a versatile guy. He can play center or the wing, but he's fast and he's so strong, and he has my favorite trait. He has a tremendous work ethic that I think he's going to be a fan favorite pretty early if he isn't already. And I think he has a real opportunity being drafted by the Oilers, again, that he might not get somewhere else because of their 2 dominant centers, to really have a big NHL career.
Yeah, if he's going to play center, it's going to be as a third line center. So, and he'll be competing with a guy like Ryan McLeod for that spot. So, as much as that would be fine if he ended up developing into that solid third line checking center, the potential is there for him to be a scoring winger and someone who can also kill penalties. I know the Oilers Twitter account tweeted out today that he'll be killing penalties for Team Canada at the World Juniors this year. So he's got a variety of skills, but I'll ask you about that right now. What are, aside from the great work ethic and power, what are the NHL translatable skills that Holloway possesses?
Well, his speed too. He has NHL speed. the work ethic, yeah, besides that, but that's a huge thing. Like he is a relentless motor, and that can't be understated. Like he's the amount of pressure that he puts on defensemen. Like he's an aggressive forechecker. So he's got the size, he's got the speed. And when he puts the pressure on the defenseman, they see him coming. He forces turnovers, and he forces them to move the puck quicker, and then he finishes his checks on top of that. So he punishes them for it, and that's such a huge. It has such a huge impact on the game. Even just the 2 games he played for Wisconsin, you could see defensemen. They knew he was coming because, like I said, he was finishing all of his checks. So they're panicking that he's coming, and then it just creates more offensive opportunities, right? So the work ethic cannot be understated at all. And that's the most exciting trait about this kid is he's always moving, always working hard. He's a 200-foot player. So I kind of compare him to McLeod in a lot of ways. I think they're very similar. They're both defensively responsible. They're both excellent skaters. I'm not sure about Holloway's offensive ceiling necessarily, but he plays what he brings. He brings an added element and that power and that determination that McLeod does not bring.
Okay.
And that's why he is your ideal power forward. So he is kind of like a Blake Wheeler or a Josh Anderson or like somebody along those lines where
As an
he's got.
NHL, as an NHL ceiling, if he turned into a Blake Wheeler, I think Oilers fans would be absolutely thrilled.
Well, yeah, and I think he's got leadership qualities too. Like I like how he he directs his teammates on the ice and just kind of how he on the bench that like you can see he's got those leadership qualities, and Blake Wheeler has that too. He was captain there. I think he might still be there.
Yeah, he's the
And
captain of the Jets.
yeah, and Holloway can shoot too. Now the only thing with Holloway is he is a little bit of a perimeter player too. I've noticed kind of the same idea. That's the one thing I worry about with him. But at least when he's on the perimeter, if he is, he's hitting people, and he's just working a little bit harder than McLeod, right? So, so yeah.
One of the things that I really think about when I try to imagine Holloway in the NHL a couple of years from now, uh, look, Connor McDavid has had multiple wingers throughout his 5 years in the NHL. I'm sure we could make a list of 10 guys or maybe even more that he's played with at some point. And one of the players who he's had, I think, his best success with, other than a guy
Maroon.
like Leon Draisaitl, was Patrick Maroon.
Yeah.
And I think that Dylan Holloway is probably a more skilled version, a faster version of Patrick Maroon. I don't know what you think about that, but I'm wondering if 2-3 years from now, he could be the perfect complement to play with McDavid just because he's like a better version of Maroon. And look what, just playing with Connor at age, when he was 20, he was able to turn Maroon into a 27 goal scorer. So by the time Connor will be then, in his mid 20s playing with a guy like Holloway, he, the I don't want to say the sky's the limit, but there definitely is a potential for some success there.
Do you know where Maroon played junior hockey?
I believe he also played 1 year with the London Knights in 07-08.
That is correct, sir. Yeah, and I get that for sure. Patty Maroon. What I kind of think of with Holloway, I just see him as a more skilled version of Cassian. He's fast. He can skate like Cassian. He hits like Cassian, except he's more skilled. That's kind of the way I look at it. But also has that Maroon kind of vibe to him as well, where he's creates havoc and he will go to the front of the net. I shouldn't say he's always a perimeter player. He does have a bit of that element to him sometimes. And a lot of fast players do. They'll just naturally, because they're so quick, they'll just skate around everybody in circles. They just have that natural tendency. But Holloway's got much more grit to his game than McLeod. So I don't want to necessarily group them together. But yeah, I could see Holloway being a more skilled version or combination of Cassian / Maroon, let's say.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like it's the perfect opportunity for him. Like the Oilers are dying for wingers like that. And he's just going to create so much havoc in the offensive zone. Defensemen are just going to give up the puck quickly, like Cassian does sometimes. And it's just going to create more chances.
Is there a reason why you think Connor McDavid thrives playing with one of those heavier players than necessarily a give and go guy who can, uh, be dangerous off the rush?
He's a tough player to play with. He's a tough player to figure out. Like he's the ultimate driver. Um, I don't know. Yeah,
Is it
it's
just because someone goes hard to the net and they're occupying some of the attention of the defenseman, so it gives him more space to work his magic in the offensive zone?
yeah, maybe. I think it's the puck retrievals, like the board battles when the pucks are
They
in
can
the
do some of the
corner.
dirty work for him, right?
Yes, yeah, somebody go down low and get the puck and get it back out to McDavid or whatever. But I mean, you think about it, he's never really had since he's been an Edmonton Oiler. He has not had a natural shooter, like a guy you would call a pure sniper or a scorer on his line ever. Like I
Yeah.
don't count Everly as a sniper. I think he might have
Like
hit
if
30 goals once in his career.
like if Connor McDavid had a David Pasternak on his line. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a pie in the sky dream, but I'm just saying, like if he had a player like that, what kind of point totals could he do?
yeah, or even a guy like Phil Kessel, like somebody like
Okay.
that just shoots, right? They shoot a ton. A volume shooter, a sniper, the guy that just can rip the puck, right? He's never really had that. Now, when he played with Draisaitl, and that's the beauty of Draisaitl, he's just his ability to adapt. He's like the ultimate playmaker, terrific passer, but he morphed into this one-timing machine and score when he played with McDavid. He gave McDavid that shooting option. Every time McDavid had the puck, Draisaitl was in a shooting position, right? But the Oilers haven't really had any natural shooters, so that's why it is important that they drafted Maximoff and they drafted Lavoie and Savoy and that, and even Tullio can rip the puck because they need those type of players. They don't have that yet.
Well, I mean, speaking of that, that's a perfect time to transition into talking about a guy who could end up being his Phil Kessel. The Oilers obviously swung a trade, sending the 76th overall pick to San Jose for the 100th and 126th overall picks. And with the 100th pick, they took left winger Carter Savoy, who is an Edmonton area product from St. Albert. And man, what a start to the his NCAA career. Goals in his first 5 games as a freshman. The first player in Denver University history to do that, I believe. And in total, after they did lose tonight where they were shut out, but still, he has 9 points in 8 games playing for the Denver University Pioneers. What can you say about the early returns on Carter Savoy? Is he already starting to look like a fourth round steal for the Oilers?
So far, so good, for sure. Definitely not my first podcast either. You can tell I'm getting pretty good at these transitions, eh?
Yeah, no kidding, hey? Setting me up
uh,
perfectly to ask the questions.
yeah, I set them up and you knock them down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's with
Well,
Savoy.
actually,
I mean,
you're knocking him down too. So
yeah. Well, with Savoy, I mean it's early, right?
right.
He's going to be in college for at least what 3 years, probably 3 years. I would think he
Could he
would come
come out
out.
after 2 years?
I think he could, but he'll probably stay 3 years. I would
Okay.
imagine. Just a hunch. Um, but yeah, I mean it's great early returns. Now it's again, I always take the cautiously optimistic approach to all these prospects. And if you follow me for however long, you know that I tend to lean favorably towards guys with high work ethics, high motors, and guys that are defensively responsible that play just make good decisions all over the ice. Those are the guys I typically gravitate towards. Work hard and be responsible. Um, those are traits I think are invaluable to any successful player. I think all the great players in the league all have great work ethics. Um, so when Savoy was picked, I'm not an Alberta guy, so I wasn't really rooting for him like a lot of Albertans were. I was a little critical of the pick. Again, the knocks on him were, and there's a reason why he dropped to the fourth round, where I think his play away from the puck, his work ethic, taking shifts off, not working hard defensively, things like that, things that I don't really necessarily like. But again, he was tremendous value in the 4th round for a guy that scored that many goals, 50 something goals in the Alberta Hockey League. I mean, you're not going to find too many guys that have scored that much in the 4th round, right? So again, it made a lot of sense. And you're right, the return is good. It's awesome early, but keep in mind, keep him in perspective. It's pretty much all been on the power play. He hasn't. I think he might have 1 goal even strength. It's college hockey. It's not necessarily the OHL or anything else. So and he's going to be there for 3 years. So we'll see what happens. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. And he's still got probably 3 years to go. But the returns are good. And for me, it's scouting is really subjective. And I never try and tell people that I know everything or I'm right and you're wrong. It's opinions are like, I guess I won't swear on this podcast, but
it's one out. It's all right.
Well, you can be wrong, right? And that's the beauty of scouting. There's going to be kids that do drop, that do have red flags, that take it personally, and from now on they play with a chip on their shoulder because
and I don't mind that either.
Right. And I think right now it looks like Savoy might be one of those kids that just said, you know what, all the critics, all the people that counted me out, I'm going to prove all you wrong. And that's fantastic. I was a guy that was critical of the pick. If I'm wrong, I will gladly eat crow. I'm rooting for all these kids to succeed, right? Like, it's just,
we're Oiler fans. Like, that's, we want them all to make it, and we want them all to be successful NHL players, right? I mean, the reality is that probably not every guy that we're going to talk about tonight is going to have a long NHL career or maybe even make the NHL. But the fact of the matter is that we're hoping that they all are going to make it. That's just, I mean, that's, at the end of the day, we're fans, right?
Yeah. For me, I just try and provide unbiased analysis, give you the pros and the cons. Don't sugarcoat it and say, oh, all these prospects are amazing, they're all going to be superstars. I just try and just be as impartial as I can, and then, let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, for sure. And looking at Savoy's game, I mean, 53 goals in 54 games in the AJHL last year as a 17-year-old. And I believe that was the most goals by a draft-eligible player in that league in 19 years. He was also rated, I'm trying to remember what scouting service had this out, but they said that he had the 2nd best shot in the draft. There were obviously, like you said, other elements to his game that were lackluster, but as far as having NHL translatable skills, if you're going to have one skill, the ability to shoot the puck, if that's your top skill as a winger, I think that's probably the best possible skill you could have.
Yeah. I mean, goals pay, right? The more goals you pay, that's sexy. You can score goals. Everybody wants goal scorers.
Yeah.
So that's what he can hang his hat on. That's what's going to get him to the NHL. What's going to keep him in the NHL is the rest of his game, right? And that still remains to be developed. So that's why the development part is so key. But yeah, I mean, it's when you got a guy that can rip the puck like that in the 4th round, that's a steal.
He's also smaller too, right? I think he's only 5'9".
Yeah.
So
5'9",
I mean,
5'10", yeah.
But at this era of hockey, I don't think the height and weight is as important as it was 10, 15 years ago, though, is it?
No, it isn't. And it's really frustrating that, I mean, the NHL scouts, I get it. They want the biggest, strongest, fastest guys. And those are the guys that typically go higher than the other ones. And all the smaller kids like Savoy and Tullio, they seem to fall despite the obvious talent. They fall because they're not as big. But if they had the exact same skills, work ethic, everything else, but they were 6'4", 220, they would be a guaranteed 1st round pick, right? So
yeah,
I mean, it is what it is.
But still, to get a guy who might be one of the best shooters in the draft in the 4th round, and to see how well he's played, like I said, I didn't have a long scouting report on this guy. I'm basically learning a lot about him, just like everyone else is for most of these guys, because not all of us are prospect experts. I know you follow these players probably closer than 90% of Oilers fans, and for me, I focus on like the top guys of the draft who the Oilers might have a chance to get with their first round pick. But when it gets to these guys in the second, third, fourth round, sometimes I've heard their names or seen them a couple times prior to the draft, but I didn't know a lot about Carter Savoy. I'd actually heard more about his little brother Matthew, who was supposed to
Yeah.
be a high draft pick. So when I heard that the Oilers had drafted him, and I started to look up Savoy's numbers, I was like, well, this kid's a goal scorer, and the Oilers definitely need more. And I'm sure when Ken Holland went up to the podium at 100th overall, he wasn't expecting Savoy to be there, but the fact that they were able to get him, I, I'm just thinking that this is a kid who is going to surprise some people. And even if it takes 3 or 4 years for him to make it, maybe he's not, on the Oilers. I'll ask you your estimated time of arrival for him in a minute. But if it does take him 3 or 4 years to get there, they've got a goal scorer in the wings, and just the fact that they're starting to add that second wave of talent that I've often talked about is really important for this organization going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. He, I mean, as far as an ETA, he's probably 3 to 4 years away, I would
Well,
imagine.
you said 3 years at least, 2 or 3 years at least in college, and then I mean,
Yeah.
would we be looking at least one, maybe 2 more years in Bakersfield?
Yeah, I think. Well, maybe we'll see. I mean, I kind of compare him to thinking about it. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between him and Brock Besser,
Okay.
and where a guy that can rip the puck, sometimes take some shifts off. Not the greatest defensively, but he's kind of like a natural goal scorer.
So
I
that
actually,
that might get him there sooner than later.
yeah, perhaps. Um, I mean, again, the timetables are tough. We don't know what's going to happen between now and then, but I would say because his speed, work ethic, and all of that, because that still needs to improve. I would say 3 years minimum, and he would get there.
For sure. And if he is going to be an offensive producer at the NHL level, it's at least encouraging to see that at the levels that he's currently playing at, that he's scoring right now. Because it's very unlikely that a guy who isn't scoring a ton in junior or college is going to develop into a top six player in the NHL. So the fact that he lit up the AJHL last year and he's off to a torrid start in college hockey,
Mhm.
it's at least encouraging that this is a guy who has the potential to maybe become a top six forward down the road. Do you have an NHL comparable in mind for him, or a ceiling that you could see?
Well, I think Brock Besser is a good
Okay, that you mentioned.
comparable.
All right.
Yeah, I think one thing that I didn't mention, I think is important to note. I think his coach has done a fantastic job. Like, this is a freshman coming in, right? And Michael Benning's on his team as well, his former teammate. But his coach did a fantastic job with him. Like, he's a rookie, he's a freshman. Um, he's a shooter. He's a natural goal scorer. That's what he likes to do. He could have told him, okay, well, you've got to earn your time here, kid, to earn your playing time.
Yeah.
And he didn't do that. Like, I mean, he started on the third line, but he gave him top power play minutes right from the first power play of the season. He put him on the power play, give him an opportunity, offensive opportunity to succeed, and that's exactly what he did. And now you can see his confidence is just soared, right? So a lot of credit goes to the coach, because now Savoy, you can just see he's flying high. But again, he could have been. There's so many coaches, and even in the AHL last year, same thing. You don't always get that opportunity, especially as a rookie. You have to earn it, and he wasn't. He was given an opportunity right away, and he took advantage of it. So kudos to the
Uh,
player and the coach.
Absolutely. And I just hope he's able to continue this. And I mean, he's only going to be playing a 26 game season for Denver this year, and
Mm-hmm.
I kind of put it out on Twitter a while ago. Could he hit 20 goals this year? I mean, that might be a bit of a reach, but I mean, I wouldn't necessarily bet against him. It could happen the way he's filling the net right now.
And it's possible. Anything's possible.
And the last thing I'll ask you, like we know we know Dylan Holloway is going to be playing at the World Juniors for Canada this year. Do you think that Savoy could be there for Team Canada next year when the tournament's back in Edmonton?
It's possible. Again, he's only got 26 games to impress, and I know he's impressed early, but it's a deep lineup, right? Deep roster. There's a lot of. I mean, next year's draft is going to be really strong too with Canadians. It's going to be tough.
Okay.
I mean, it's. I know with a lot of these kids, usually they kind of grow up in the Team Canada, the international circuit. So
And they've
usually
all
it
kind
helps.
of played together by the time they're.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's hard for other guys that haven't been in it yet to kind of crack that, but who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about that all the time. They were talking on Edmonton radio the other day about how strong the American team is going to be this year, and that all those kids, basically, like you said, grew up together playing in the under 18 program in the States and have been together at the under 17, the
Yeah.
under 18, and now playing at the World Juniors for the second straight year. Like this, the chemistry will be, there for these guys right away. But anyway, I'm hopeful that Savoy will be there a year from now. I'll keep my fingers crossed for that. And we'll wrap up this episode by talking about a player that I know you're a big fan of. You've already mentioned it on this podcast, center Ty Tullio, who was selected 126th overall this year. Sean, why was a player who averaged more than a point per game in the OHL at age 17 still available in the fifth round of the draft?
It's a good question. He is a right winger too. He
Oh,
doesn't.
sorry. On Elite Prospects, it listed him as a center and a winger. I didn't know which one to go with.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's a winger, which is a good thing. He's a right shot. We don't have enough of those. Right shot, right winger, right, and he's got a booming shot too, especially a one-timer on the power play, which is another need. But it's a really good question. This year was really different in terms of the draft, and I kind of asked myself that too. Like, obviously, I scout the OHL a lot. And one thing I wanted to mention, Carter Savoy, in terms of value, you were talking there. Carter Savoy was ranked by NHL Central Scouting as the 50th prospect overall. He was ranked
And to get him,
50th.
and they got him 50 picks later.
And Tullio was 52.
And
Yeah,
they got him,
in the
quick
fifth.
math off the top of my head, like over 70 picks later.
Yeah. So incredible value. Great job by Holland there. But as far as Tullio goes, it's kind of getting, and I don't know if this is a trend that's going to continue, but it all comes down to eligibility. So there's a longer, I guess there's a longer term to sign players that play in U.S. college, for example. There's a longer or a larger window in terms of eligibility to sign them. Whereas if you draft a guy out of the OHL, for example, if you don't sign him within 3 years or 2 years or something, I don't know all the details on it. All I know is there's a difference between drafting a kid out of the OHL versus drafting a kid out of the US. And we saw a lot of that this year. So not only Ty Tullio, but there were a lot of guys that I was really high on, and a lot of people were. Like Martin Chromiak, for example, was another guy that dropped to the fourth or fifth round. People had him potentially second or third. There was a bunch of, and there were a few guys that James Hardy, for example, scored over 30 goals in the OHL. He didn't even get drafted. And then there were guys that played in high school, U.S. high school, and scored 2 goals in U.S. high school, and they got drafted. Like, it didn't make a lot of sense. There wasn't a lot of rhyme or reason to it. But then somebody explained to me that it's all about eligibility. Teams that are drafting these guys the fourth, fifth round, they want guys that they have the rights to longer as opposed to the CHL is shorter. So that had a lot to play with it. And then in Tullio's case, he isn't a speedster, but he's certainly not slow. I think his skating is good enough right now, and it'll get better because he has a very high work ethic and he has a high hockey IQ. Those are two things. If the skating isn't great, but it's good enough, but they have the high hockey IQ and the great work ethic, then usually I don't worry about that. And he has those. So because he's smaller, and he's not the fastest skater, plus you add in the eligibility thing that's going on now, and apparently it's going to be a trend. I think that's kind of why he dropped. But as Oilers fans, who cares? Like, we got a great player in the fifth round. He's a tremendous kid. He's got a great work ethic. He's got a fantastic shot. And the knocks I have on Savoy, both coming back, defensive game, and not hustling hard. And Tullio doesn't really have that. Tullio kind of gives it every shift. So I think it's, you're going to ask me, and I'm just going to go there now. In terms of an NHL comparison, if you look at their stats, if you look at their stature, their size, and you just kind of look at just how they play the game, Tullio not even kind of, he's almost a Brendan Gallagher clone, in my opinion.
Interesting.
he's gritty. He can shoot. He's energetic. He's so similar to Gallagher. Now, Tullio, to his credit, he compares himself to Brad Marchand minus the cheap shots. I've heard him say that before, and
I
I
think I
do.
remember that too in his Oilers TV interview. I think he did say that. Yeah,
Yeah, and I do see
that's
some
funny.
I do see some Marchand in him as well. And let's hope that's his ceiling. Let's hope he gets to that level. But for now, I think I'll set the bar at Gallagher. And I think
Okay.
if he's a second or third line, whatever, energy guy, he can pump in 20 goals. I think that's in the fifth round, that's a huge steal. So I'm really excited about the pick. He's probably one of my favorite prospects. And his dad follows me on
I
Twitter now, owner of the Oshawa General. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Do
And
you think he
yeah,
had to overcome some nepotism as well, being drafted to the team that his dad owned?
I don't know if that affected him as far as the NHL goes.
Okay.
I don't think that was an issue. Like it's when they sit down and do their interviews. I'm sure that question was asked. It's do you think you were gifted playing time because your dad is an owner? But I think if he just kind of relied on just his play, you just watched him play. Like you see, he was a hardworking kid, and he's got again just like Savoy, he's got that shot. But he's got real sneaky playmaking ability too, and he makes a lot of good decisions with the puck. Like he has a lot of playmaking ability too, and again, he's got the work ethic and he's responsible. There's a lot to like about this kid. So, yeah, if he turns out to be anything close to Brendan Gallagher, I think Oilers fans will be ecstatic.
That's awesome. And I think he played with another one of your favorite guys, Philip Tomasino, in Oshawa this
Oshawa,
year too, right?
he did, yeah. And those two, they called each other, or somebody coined them the Italian Stallions,
Yeah. I remember,
Tomasino and Tullio. Yeah.
yeah, that's funny. Um, but those two, I mean, is Tomasino eligible to come back?
Yes.
Okay, so
Although,
he'll
yeah, although there's a lot of talk he's going to make Nashville.
okay.
Nashville, they're going for a youth movement, and I guess they're really high on him and impressed. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he sticks with Nashville. But if he comes back
Fair
to
enough.
Oshawa and plays with Tullio, that would be amazing too.
Now Tullio, in the meantime, has found a place to play, and I don't know if Ken Holland helped facilitate that as well, or if he was able to uh, work something out with his agent and get that set up on his own. But he's now playing pro hockey over in Slovakia, where he
Mm-hmm.
has a goal and 2 points in 3 games so far. So he's having a little bit of success over there. I saw the highlight on Twitter of his first goal, a nice finish on a good pass. Um, this is it's good to get him over there playing because he really hasn't played since last March, and I don't know when the OHL season is going to officially get up and going, but uh, I would suspect that he'll be back playing in Ontario when it does. But just to get going and be playing pro hockey over in Europe, I think that's going to be a really good way for him to get his season started.
Yeah, well, and he's supposed to play. The OHL is supposed to start, I think, late January. Now we'll see what happens. I don't know. Maybe it'll be early February. But with Oshawa, they've got a bunch. I think their whole team's over there actually in Slovakia. They did like
Oh,
a
okay,
team thing. So currently, he's got there's two players from the Oshawa Generals, Alan McShane and David Jesus. He
right.
actually pronounces it
Is it
Jesus.
Jesus? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and he spells it just like it. They're also on his team. So he's got some familiarity. He's got like Oshawa Generals on his team,
Well, that'll
and but
definitely help.
yeah, it helps for sure. And him and McShane really just hit it off right from the beginning. But I think the whole squad is over there because there aren't the COVID restrictions. I don't know if it's just like a training camp or they're practicing or whatever, but they're all over there. So yeah, he's getting playing time, he's getting conditioning, which is kind of the main thing, and he's getting enough opportunity. Now his team is garbage. They had -1 point before he got there.
I
They were
heard about that. They
yeah,
were they were punished, right? They faced they didn't have a point all season, and then didn't they broke some league rule where they were fined 3 points?
yeah, they're 0-16-2. So they had two overtime losses. So they got 2 points, but they
Two
lost
points,
three. So they were actually -1 in the standings.
which is hilarious.
Yeah, and then Tullio got there. They lost to the top team in the league by a goal. And
Oh,
then I may or may not have made a bet after that and won several $100s when they won their first game.
wow.
And yeah, and then they lost the one after that by a goal. But they've been competitive every game. I've watched all three games. And yeah, so it's good for him. He's just missed a bunch of shots too. I think he could have had 3 or 4 more goals, like literally just ripped the puck and it just grazed the crossbar. So he's close. He looks like he's in good shape, and yeah, it's good for him to. So hopefully, if the OHL does start up, he can just jump right in and just take off, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is a good player that we should finish up on tonight because he will be, I believe, the only Oilers prospect in the OHL this year. So you can definitely focus in a little more on him, and especially because you're such a fan of the guy as it is. Just what do you expect from him when he gets back to the Ontario Hockey League this year? He, like I said, he had 66 points in 62 games last year. Do you expect him to take another step forward? I know they're not going to play a full season, but will his points per game even expand more as he plays power play and just a year older? Like, what do you expect from as an 18-year-old in the league now?
Yeah, it should. It should. He should take off. I mean, he looks a little bit bigger now. He looks a little bit quicker. I mean, I think he's 5'10". He looks like he's taller than that now, but he's light. He was 160 pounds or 165. He looks like he's put on a bit of weight. But yeah,
Okay.
he should come in and do well, like over a point per game for sure. But the goal scoring, I think, will rise, and a lot does depend on whether Tomasino is with him or not. I think that's a big part of it. But again, because him and his teammates are all kind of playing and practicing over there, I think they'll come back to the OHL and they won't miss a beat. So I look for him to have a good season.
Good to hear. And also, because you said he does have a little bit of Brendan Gallagher in him, I'll just ask, do you see him as a guy who could potentially one day fill in a top six role, even if it's spot duty? Or do you see him as just a really good energy line player? Because I look at a guy like Josh Archibald who can fill in a second line, first line role in a pinch, but ideally you don't want him playing there full time. I just wonder if that's something that you could see Tulio fitting in as well.
No, Tulio, I'm convinced Tulio will be a Brendan Gallagher. He is a top 6 player in my mind because
Really?
he has the work ethic. He has the elite shot and release. His shot is it's dynamite, absolutely dynamite. Um, and again, he works hard, right? And he's one of those. Every year, there's kids that drop in the draft, and this is what I was talking about before. And I know we got to wrap this up here,
Yeah.
but I like taking gambles on kids in the mid rounds. The kids that you think are a step too slow and a little bit too small to make it. Those are the kids. These are the Trocheks, the Marchands, the Marchessaults, the Braden Points. He's that kind of kid, the ones that people count out. But he has that work ethic. You can see the hockey sense, you can see the playmaking ability, you can see the work ethic. He's got it all, but he's got that elite NHL shot, so he's going to score goals. He'll do whatever it takes. He'll crush the net. He'll battle the boards. He'll do everything. He's got all those traits. Just give him a couple years to develop. Let him, gain a stride or two in his skating. Get a little bit stronger. I'm telling you, we've got a steal, and I'm convinced. I believe in this kid almost more than anybody. Any of these kids that we've drafted, I believe in this kid, and I think he'll be a top 6 forward eventually.
That'd be fantastic if he did. And look, and it's understandable that have watched Tulio more, like him more, but I would say just from judging from Oilers Twitter, which, isn't always the most reliable source, but at the same time, it does give you a good gauge on what the fans are thinking or feeling. And I would say that most Oilers fans on there are more excited about Carter Savoy than possibly even Dylan Holloway at this point. And a lot of that has to do with his hot start to the year. But do you see Ty Tulio having more upside than Carter Savoy?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think the shots are similar, very similar. I think if you put Tulio in Denver, he would be and put him on the power play right from the beginning. He'd be scoring those goals as well, but he'd also be playing defense and finishing his checks and battling in front of the net. And I mean, it's not a knock on Savoy at all. I think both of them. I look at them both as equal right now. And if one of them turns out to be a top 6 forward and the other one doesn't, then that's great. Who it is, who knows? Just for me personally, I've watched Tulio for a while now. Obviously, watching Tomasino and watching Tulio. I tweeted out there before the draft. I said, "Please, Oilers, for once, can you please
I
draft
remember that.
one of my guys? Draft Ty Tulio and we drafted Tulio. So I'm ecstatic. I'm going to go some Oshawa games this year, and I'm going to talk to him, and I'm looking forward to him being an Oilers. So
That's awesome.
I don't want to compare prospects. Hopefully they both work out.
I just hope that 2 or 3 years from now, we're seeing Tulio, Savoy, Lavoie, Holloway, all in Bakersfield, all having an impact and kind of growing up together in the system and pushing for NHL jobs together. Because you see how so many successful NHL organizations have these guys who come up through the system together. And I want that to really become a trait of the Oilers organization as well, where these guys are building that bond and that chemistry and but at the same time, internal competition and trying to be the one to get to the NHL first. And you're a subscriber to the Bakersfield Condors games. You have AHL TV, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, when all those guys get there, that's going to probably be like a dream come true to watch all those guys there.
Well, yeah, being an OHL guy, it was like when Bouchard, Samorukov, McLeod, and Maximoff,
Yeah.
4 OHL guys all went there at the same time. That was great.
And I know we didn't talk about Samorukov today too, but I mean, what an intriguing prospect too. And I can't wait to see what he's going to do in the next year or two.
Yeah, and don't sleep on Kirill Maximoff. He had more points than Lavoie in his last 2 years. Most people don't realize that.
I haven't forgot about him, but it seems like he's one of the less talked about Oilers prospects over the last, say, year to 18 months.
He's one of the forgotten guys, and he didn't get a lot of opportunity in Bakersfield last year, and I was disappointed in that. But I think next AHL season, McLeod and Maximoff are going to kind of be the top guys, and like you said, these other guys are going to kind of have to earn their stripes there. And yeah, it's an exciting time to be an Oilers fan because there's this prospect pool. It's deep. It's deep.
That's awesome, man. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. It's been awesome to talk to you. Before we say goodnight, can you tell everyone where they can follow you and find your work?
You can reach me at the oilnight.ca for the Oil Night Prospect Network. Doing all kinds of articles there. I've got a few guys working for me covering different leagues. You can also check us out on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Want to get to 1,000 subscribers, make a few cents off all the videos we're putting up. We're doing prospect shift by shift reports on pretty much every prospect we can. So if you haven't seen these kids play, you can go on there and watch videos and kind of get a feel for their playing style and their strengths and weaknesses and that. So we'll try and at least get one video per prospect up there in the next few weeks here. So make sure you check that out as well. And just want to say I appreciate you having me on, Eric. It was fun.
Yeah. No, it's great. Hopefully we can do this again. Maybe we'll touch base a few months from now and give an update on how these guys are doing as their season kind of winds down or it gets closer to the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good.
All right. Well, enjoy the World Juniors. It's going to be fun. It's just around the corner here. And thanks again for being on the podcast.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Go Canada, go.
All right. So for Sean Patrick Ryan, I'm Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever podcast. We're out. Oilers Live.